What is the biggest unsolved mystery in human history? I love unsolved mysteries. But one that always gets me is the murder of Missy Bevers. She was killed in the early morning at a church that she taught yoga at. Security footage from the church showed the murderer roaming the halls of the church all night. But that's not what's weird. What's weird is that the murderer was dressed head to toe in police quiet gear. It is the weirdest and eeriest video footage, and it is just unsettling. There's lots of theories, but her murder has never been solved. And I believe there hasn't even been a real suspect in the case. The Alps murders. To this day, not only is there no suspect, but seemingly absolutely no motive to the murders of the Al Healy family and a completely unrelated French cyclist. The police don't even know who the target was. The more you look at the case, the more questions there are. The victims were killed in a manner of a professional, hit by using a gun that no professional would use. The gunman was experienced and calm enough to leave the scene quickly and efficiently, so much so that the cyclist on the scene minutes behind Molière saw and heard absolutely nothing. The murders, though, were uncontrolled and carried out in broad daylight, where anybody could have chanced upon the scene, and Penn saw it not reached his car trying to escape. Most of the victims may have survived. No suspect, no motive, no clear target, weird mix of professional hit and complete novice. This case baffles me utterly. I dearly hope to see it solved one day. The lead mask mystery of Brazil. The bodies of two men found wearing lead masks, covering their eyes with a notebook that mysteriously read, "For 30 p.m. be at the determined place, 6:30 p.m. Swallow capsules. After effect, protect metals. Wait for signal in Portuguese." One theory revolves around the testimony of a friend of the two men who claimed that they were members of a group of scientific spiritualists. The men were apparently attempting to contact extraterrestrials or spirits, using psychedelics, believing that such an encounter would be accompanied by blinding light. The men cut metal masks to shield their eyes and may have died of overdoses. This account is corroborated by the esoteric diary found at the scene and by the mask-making materials and literature concerning spirits found at the men's house. Back in 2002, I folded and placed 3 $100 bills in my back right pocket while standing in a living room. I grabbed my wallet from the bar, walked to the front door, where I decided it was safe to transfer the hundreds to my wallet. My pocket was empty. There was no one else home, and I looked everywhere for more than an hour. This episode has seriously damaged my sanity and self-esteem. The disappearance of Ashad. Degree, a 9-year-old Ashad Agree disappeared from her home in Shelby, North Carolina on Valentine's Day 2000. She went to bed the night before, and when her mother went to wake her up in the morning, Asha was gone. She was seen walking along Highway 18 at about 4 in the morning. Several passing motorists saw her, and when one turned around and began to approach her, she left the roadside and ran into a wooded area. It was a cold night, and the witness said there was a storm raging. When he saw her, she wasn't wearing a jacket or socks. A year after she vanished, a construction worker found her book bag in a wooded area. It was wrapped in a plastic bag. When I was a kid, I was playing with a bouncy ball in my room. It had rolled under my bed, and I went to grab it. Absolutely nothing was under the bed, being a small child with an attention span of a goldfish. I started to play with Legos instead. A couple minutes later, the ball rolled out from under the bed, seemingly from nowhere. In India, in the early 2000s, there was a creature called the Monkey Man who was attacking the people in Delhi, and people were so terrified from him that they stopped sleeping at night so that they could protect themselves. We still don't know whether it was real, or was it just a rumor that people started believing in the murders of billionaires Barry and Honey Sherman, found dead in their mansion in Toronto by their realtor. They were found with their necks tied, fully clothed on the pool deck, with no signs of a break in well-known philanthropists. Barry was in the pharmaceutical industry, and they donated millions annual to multiple charities. The police originally believed it was the murder-suicide and didn't pursue other leads. The family launched a private investigation. that found the evidence didn't support that theory, and thus proved police incompetence. As the public became more interested, it was discovered that there was a whole family dispute over inherited shares of the Apotex Company. The Shermans' nieces and nephews had launched lawsuit over their right to inherit shares which they lost and most accepted. The Shermans' children hired private investigators. Because of the inept, Toronto police uncovered an unknown man leaving the property around the time of the murders. The case is fascinating and is the subject of multiple podcasts, a book, and a movie. The treasure of the Knights Templar. To this day, it has never been found. Is it true that it exists, or is it just fiction? How can treasures of that magnitude just vanish? The story behind it is fascinating. But is it just that now a story that has become part of the history behind the Knights Templar, and the treasure doesn't actually exist anymore? Maybe one day someone will find out one of the most enduring mysteries in human history is the disappearance of the ancient Maya civilization. The Maya were a highly advanced civilization that flourished in Central America for hundreds of years before mysteriously disappearing in the 9th century. Despite extensive archaeological research, we still don't know exactly what caused the downfall of the Maya or why their civilization collapsed. Zodiac Killer. They only got away with it because it was so long ago. Killers usually don't go very long without getting caught. Today's age, I think they have an idea. But it was so long ago that all the suspects are long dead by now, so we can't ever really know. Random, single acts of violence are often very hard to solve. A case like Zodiac, where he's doing multiple crimes and deliberately leaving clues, and sending messages to the police, would almost certainly get caught in modern times. That's basically what happened to BTK. He had effectively gotten away with murder in the 70s and 80s. And then when he decided to send a message in the early 2000s, it got him almost immediately caught. Who reached the top of Everest first? Irvine and Mallory attempted the summit, but never made it back. The one eyewitness said he saw them at the second step, and most believe that if they had made it that far, they wouldn't have stopped, even if the summit would have resulted in death. Only one of their bodies were found, and the other one with a camera that could show evidence. If they did in fact reach the summit, he's still missing. Don't think we'll ever get an answer, but it's so interesting to me. All the knowledge lost in the Library of Alexandria, 40,000 to 400,000 scrolls were lost, all containing the history and mysteries of the ancient world. What was in those scrolls? Also fascinating is the knowledge lost at Alamut Castle in Iran, home to the Ismaili sect. They were said to have gained supernatural powers from what seemed to be psychedelics, and were known for their highly trained and loyal assassins. UFOs and cryptids like Bigfoot. It can't be psychological, especially with events with multiple witnesses. Trained observers, such as military law enforcement and so on, are usually considered reliable witnesses. Even various governments have admitted there's something they can't explain. So what the heck are they? I think that to this day, most of what is taught about the pyramids of Egypt is complete bullcrap. It's clear that we don't know what their true purpose was, who built them, or how they built them. But there has been dozens of attempts to move or quarry just one of the stones used, and then transport it, with the tools and the methods available then. And no one to this day can do it or explain accurately how they did it. Theories about canals and boats, floating 100-ton stones down a man-made canal, total nonsense. Ramps, total nonsense. Granite cut with such precision it would take lasers and high-tech equipment to do such things today. Then there's the Sphinx and its true age, the disappearance of Amelia Earhart in 1937. She tried to fly around the entire world, and during one of the final legs of her journey, she lost contact with the ship that was going to lead her to the island where she was supposed to land. Why she lost contact has an explanation. And yes, it's obvious that she crashed, because she ran a fuel. But unlike the MH370, they never found any remains of her plane. Nothing, not a single atom of that plane was ever found. Why parents don't universally read books to their young children, at least 4 nights a week for 15 to 30 minutes. This foundational literacy, given in early childhood years, could transform the social world. It's so easy and has minimal costs. Most of the students that I see struggling in school never had that, and it alters the course of their entire lives. The Dyatlov Pass incident, death of the Dyatlov group, was an event in which 9 Soviet hikers died in the northern Ural Mountains between February 1 and 2, 1959 in uncertain circumstances. Overnight something caused them to cut their way out of their tent and flee the campsite, while inadequately dressed for the heavy snowfall and sub-zero temperatures. After the group's bodies were discovered, an investigation by Soviet authorities determined that 6 of them had died from hypothermia, while the other 3 had been killed by physical trauma. 4 of the bodies were found lying in running water in a creek, and 3 of these 4 had damaged soft tissue to the head and face. 2 of the bodies had missing eyes, 1 had a missing tongue, and another had missing eyebrows. The investigation concluded that a compelling natural force had caused the deaths. Numerous theories have been put forward to account for the unexplained deaths, including animal attacks, hypothermia, an avalanche, katabatic winds in for sound-induced panic, military involvement, or some combination of these factors. This is the Wikipedia explanation. According to me, it could be aliens because the people who lived down the mountain saw flashing lights in the middle of the night in the sky. The Russian government even tried to close the investigation and refused the families to take the bodies to their native country and were forced to be cremated in Russia. There is also a movie on this incident called The Devil's Pass, which I recommend watching. This one really attracts me. Drive north of Las Vegas for a couple hours towards the most middle of nowhere you can imagine, if you do it right, where there is pretty much no sign of human occupation. All of a sudden you will see the famous sign that states that this is U.S. government property, and use of lethal force is enforced. Beyond this point, it is known by various names, but its most popular is Area 51. It describes an immense area of desert surrounding a super-secret air base. Some facts are known. There is a base with a long airstrip and a number of buildings around it. Some secret airplanes have been developed there, like the U-2 and the SR-71. And based on the latest satellite pictures, it is still active, all the way back in the 70s. The proof of concept for a stealth airplane, the Lockheed Have Blue, was being developed there in absolute secret. The plane looked like nothing else that flew in those days, and anybody looking at it would think it was an alien spaceship. Given that what's going on there now, what kind of crazy technology is being worked there now? This intrigues me so much that I would take a job there just to find out. But unfortunately, I don't work in anything related to the aerospace and or defense industries. The disappearance of the Roanoke colony. In 1587, a group of English settlers established a colony on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. However, when a supply ship arrived 3 years later, the colony had vanished without a trace. I think arguably the biggest unsolved mystery is why the U.S. taxpayers allow their government to squander over 4/5 of $1 trillion every year in a military budget that is bigger than the next 10 largest militaries combined. This buys no security that two oceans don't provide, and instead pays over 800 bases that we know of in foreign countries and a nuclear arsenal that it can't even use without committing suicide. It also pays for continual wars and proxy wars that don't benefit the U.S. population, while it has the worst health outcomes of the developed world, with higher infant mortality and shorter lifespans, with just a few billion of that waste. The U.S. could pay for fresh water and waste treatment for the entire planet, which would create such goodwill that it might end a lot of fighting and strife. The Headless Valley of the Canadian province of the Northwest Territories. Most people who go into the valley, if they stay for a couple days, never return. Their heads are removed and never found. We don't yet know what causes it, and we're not very keen on finding out. The Annapolis Royal Massacre of 2001 is definitely one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in human history. The tragic event claimed the lives of several members of the Annapolis royal family, including King Barandra and Queen Aishwarya, in what appeared to be a carefully orchestrated massacre despite numerous investigations and inquiries. The exact circumstances of the massacre remains shrouded in mystery, with many questions still unanswered. Was it an inside job, as some have suggested? Who was behind the attack, and what was their motive? Perhaps what makes this mystery even more intriguing is the fact that it took place in modern times, with plenty of resources and technology at our disposal. And yet nearly 2 decades later, we still don't have a definitive answer to what happened that fateful night. In Nepal, the Nepalese royal massacre remains a haunting reminder of the fragility of human life and the unpredictable nature of tragedy. May the victims rest in peace, and may we never forget the mystery that still surrounds their untimely deaths. Secular mystery, Jack the Ripper. Religious mystery, co-Adamism. That is, if Adam, Eve, and their 2 later 3 children were all of humankind, then why did Cain request protection? A mark so he wouldn't be killed. Where did Cain and Seth's wives come from? With whom did Cain build the city of Enoch? Some will say his sisters, and some will say pre-existing humans living outside of Adam's dominion. Some will state the whole Genesis narrative is a literary device, quite the mystery. But for me personally, the biggest unsolved mystery is a belief in socialist and/or communist improvement of a society or nation. Despite the total lack of evidence for this belief, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, which was an international passenger flight operated by Malaysia Airlines, disappeared on March 4, 2014 while heading from Kuala Lumpur International Airport, heading to Beijing Capital International Airport. I've listened to the Unexplained Mysteries podcast on it, and looking forward to the Netflix documentary MH370, the plane that disappeared, coming out this month. Stonehenge, we have absolutely no idea how it was built, or who built it, or even when it was built. Really, we know it was modified in the Mesolithic era, but we cannot archaeologically deduce when it was made. It's been used by many groups for many reasons, but ultimately, its origins and the methods used to bring the stones to the area are total mysteries. Even more dubious and mysterious, what was its purpose? Why was it built? Why work so hard to create such a thing? Was it a monument to someone or an event? Perhaps a grave marker. We don't even know what the people who built it called it. Why humans kill each other but other mammals don't? Humans create imaginary laws, rules to live by. And for 5,000 years they have 100% collapsed into us killing each other. War will call this humane. While other species prey on other mammals to survive, they don't kill each other. Even the mighty lion fighting to breed the herd, win in a battle with other males. Pin them, put their fangs on their neck, and then let them live. Humans shoot each other for just thinking something different than they believe, thinking their story is somehow worth killing another human. Netflix has a show called Ancient Apocalypse. Many people consider the narrator of the show to be a pseudoscientist, but it's hard to ignore that multiple ancient, advanced cultures scattered around the planet have the same or similar origin story. Essentially, all of their origin stories are of the culture being in chaos after a flood or some other cataclysmic event. Then a stranger shows up from a far land, usually on a boat, and teaches the people things like laws, science, mathematics, farming techniques, etc. Then they disappear. Most end up as gods in their culture. But the much more logical conclusion is that there was a much more advanced human civilization on Earth, earlier than we realized, that were explorers and shared their knowledge. It helps to explain also how at almost the same time period, multiple cultures around the world were building huge pyramids using similar designs and construction methods. We like to think we understand the universe, and that physics is a well-grounded discipline, and in some ways it is. However, we have no idea what dark matter or dark energy is, and yet we think it makes up 27% and 68% of the universe, respectively. Why is there something rather than nothing? That's still pretty much it, in my honest opinion. This question right here has kept me up at night for a while, and it used to give me straight up Panic attacks when I thought about it. Too much reality is honestly a scary concept. In 1893, British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans purchased some ancient stones with mysterious inscriptions on them at a flea market in Athens. On a later trip to the excavations at Knossos on the Isle of Crete, he recognized one of the symbols from his stones and began a study of the engraved tablets being uncovered at various sites on the island. He discovered two different systems which he called Linear A and Linear B. While Linear B was deciphered in the early 1950s, it turned out to represent an early form of Greek. Linear A above that has still not been deciphered. There is an entire culture of information that predates much of our history, a window into ancient humanity that is simply locked away from us because we don't know how to read it. An active one in the archaeology world is the exact time frame of when humans made it to the Americas. The date keeps getting pushed back with more controversial discoveries that then just turn to evidence as they pile up. It's a fascinating story to see unfold. Yeah, I like this one too. I think many of the traces of early settlement are likely submerged. Sea levels were much lower during the Ice Age, and the majority of human settlements are along the coasts. So a huge piece of our history is probably lying on the seafloor completely undisturbed and possibly well preserved.